Okay, cool. Sorry for the delays. Y'all having fun? Yeah. This is my first Derbycon. I love it. It's awesome. So hopefully today we'll actually learn a little bit about securing Windows with group policy. So thank you all for attending. My name is Josh Rickard. I have been in IT for about 7 years now. I have a GCWN and a GCFA. It's a Certified Windows Security Administrator and Certified Forensics Analyst from SANS. Most of my job has been Windows security for the most part. I mean, we did it from all the way from deployment all the way to actual hardening of endpoints. So one of the pieces that we kind of focused from, and I was in IR and focused on digital forensics, was group policy because, hey, it was free. I worked at a higher education department for a while, and well, there's no budget there. So, we focused on that as well as PowerShell automation. Just kind of making sure and try to do as much as we can with as little as we had. So before we kind of dive into group policy and what we can actually do, we should actually understand. Sorry, there's a bunch of cables like right here. We should actually understand how it gets applied, right? One of the biggest things is there's an acronym called LSDOU. Anyone ever heard of it? It's not the drug. But it's LSD means local, site, domain, and organizational unit. So every single group policy is applied in that kind of order. And we'll kind of go through. So the first one, let's talk about local, right? Amazing art, right? With the local, it's like chaos, right? There's no rules, there's like no government, it's just kind of overthrow, like there's no set order. And so with local type group policies, they're actually, just like any other group policy, you can specify it for a machine or a user. And there's also like loopback processing mode and a bunch of other things, but you can think of it, okay, I need to know what I'm trying to attempt to alter or to harden. The next thing is it's just, local is just like a free-for-all. It's unmanaged. An individual user can actually go in and specify, okay, let's have these certain rules, but we all know that probably they're not going to be in sync with the rest of the machines in our network, and users are probably not going to do that. So every local Windows version, let's say since XP, Service Pack 3, blah, 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 has to have, it has a local group policy editor that we can use. And with that, but it's not really the proper way to do this. So we can think of local as that way, but the next kind of phase is sites. Sites have you can kind of think of it as a country or set block by region, right? You usually segment them by local location, but subnet or your network structure, or a physical location. So you have the United States here. It has, multiple domains. You have Europe that may have multiple different domains, like the US may have 50 domains, right? European Union may have 13 or 14, whatever it is, different domains, each representing another segment within that organizational structure, right? So, site-based group policies, they're used, but they're not really used a lot, at least in my past experience, but you can apply a rule, and we can kind of think of it as like a federal government, right? We have certain rules that encompass everything. We don't kill people, pay taxes, right to bear arms, whatever it is, those are set rules at the federal level. So we can actually apply them throughout the entire site that impacts every single domain into the individual country. So we can look at, each individual state as its own domain. Let's look at Kentucky. Right, we're here. This is my first time in Kentucky, so it's pretty awesome so far. Except for the drinking at 4 in the morning last night. But it was awesome, but not this morning. So domains, we actually have state laws, right? You can have actually, a specific state says, all right, we're going to have our state taxes to be this way, or we're going to have certain road allocation. They have certain rules that can be applied to that individual domain. So we have the federal laws right now, and we actually have the state laws. And so no matter what, those federal laws will be applied, But then the state will also be in effect as well, and may trump some of the federal laws depending on which ones they are. We can even break it down even further, where you have an organizational unit. And in our example or analogy of states and government, is that each county in that state can be considered its own little separate block, but it also has its own rules, right? Like you have the individual county may say, we want to charge an extra 1% tax to fix our parks, or whatever it is. You know, we actually vote for it, but you actually apply that policy, so that county has to abide by, you know, federal laws, state laws, but they can actually specify their own laws. So you can do it at any structure or any segment within that organization. You can even go down to the street. Who has like a homeowners association or anything? I don't, but no. All right. So, you know, homeowners says, hey, if you live on this block, you need to have your hedges like this tall. You can't have pools and you can't have tires in your front yard. You know, you pay for all this. It's awesome. But you can actually specify individual rules all the way down to that granular level, even to your home. And even yourself can actually have rules all the way down to individual rooms, even down to your refrigerator. But still, we have federal laws that apply. We have, which are site-based group policy objects. We have domain-based, based on our state laws. We have other regulations that we have to follow for a homeowners association or a county, and you just keep going in that depth. We can even say, oh, no internet tonight at past 10 p.m. for if you have kids or whatever it is. You can specify those rules all the way down to whatever level of granularity that you deem or that you have rights to. So kind of talking about in general, we always have this structure, and it's really based off of your AD infrastructure. You have your sites in a multiple Active Directory forest, and then you actually have domains, and those domains have organizational units that keep going in as far depth that you want to. Just depends. You can even go down to your light socket if you wanted to. So each policy has this specific ability to, you know, specify or trump other rules. But there's certain federal rules, right? Or certain rules in Active Directory or in group policy, like your password policy or that password expiration, that trump all of those because they're at the global scale. So that's kind of a little bit about how group policy applies. Now let's actually get into some fun stuff, hopefully. One of the things that with group policy that you can do is you can manage users, right? They need managing, just like anything else. Computers, hardware, network, software, whatever it is. But you can actually, with users, with group policy, let me step back. Let's talk about some actually highly advanced or privileged accounts. Anyone recognize any of these? Enterprise admins, domain admins, schema admins, account operators. These are very, very high privileged accounts. They can, like, every attacker in their dream wants one of these accounts because they own your network. But with group policy, we can actually manage who is allowed into these groups and who isn't. One of the ways that we can do this, or let's think of it, let's step back. So let's think that we have Wi-Fi at home, right? Internet. You lock down. When you have guests come over, you usually probably have a guest network, or you have a segmentation, and you allow certain people into your network. Who wants to become rallies at home? Just like everybody, you can just free for all, just roam around, do whatever the hell they want. You don't. So with group policy, we can actually restrict and manage who has access to specific accounts. An example is restricted groups. With restricted groups, we can actually specify in group policy, this is located when you actually edit a group policy object, it's in the security settings, local settings, and restricted groups. So with the restricted groups, we can actually specify, okay, domain admins, enterprise admins, schema admins, whatever it is, and we can actually use this policy to actually add individual users. Okay, Joe should have access to this, Sam should have access to domain admins, whatever it is, and only those very, very highly privileged users are able to add themselves to this group. By accident, it depends on how big your organization, how mature your organization is with Active Directory, but when we add these in, every time group policy refreshes, it will always put these users back into that group, no matter what. Example, let's say that you have a user that says, hey, IT guy, I need help because my computer is borked. It's fried. Something's wrong. So IT guy goes over, logs in, types in his credentials, and off we go to the races, right? But he did not know that, oh, the malicious user actually went in and created a startup script, a login script, that used his permissions to actually elevate, create a new user, and inject it into domain admins. So now, if we have this restricted group, well, without it, he's sitting in domain admins like, I don't know, taking a break, or he probably not, or I don't know what he's doing, party, whatever it is, because he just got you. With this restricted groups, every time the group policy refreshes across your domain, and that's on domain controllers, that's on your local machines, it will actually replace that group members with what you've specified in group policy. Not saying it's a fail-safe, not saying it's going to, ultimately solve the problem of injecting people into domain admins, but it's another layer that only specific people are able to add themselves into domain admins and protect themselves. So by average, let's look at it from domain controllers or group policy refreshes every 90 minutes by default, but if you propagate that across all your machines, on average, it's about a couple minutes typically, depending on how large your individual user base is. So every couple of minutes, that group is going to get replaced every single time with those new users. So if anyone does inject themselves, well, we just kick them right back out and we go on our day. And it's kind of just another layer of defense to kind of help protect these highly sensitive accounts. User rates. So there's a lot of privileges with users. When you first buy a house, what do? I'll ask and someone yell out something. Huh? Oh, all right. Good. That's what I do too. We change the locks, right? You don't want just anyone to have access into your house. So you take that same principle with Windows and Active Directory and group policy. Why do we always leave like the default privileges that every single user has? Makes no sense. Like, by default, there's some highly privileged privileges that you actually have in your environment. And even if you have, who here has like most of their local users as administrators on their account? Don't lie. Like, one person. Well, never mind. I'll see you guys later. But in environments that I've been in, that's a hard battle to have, especially, again, higher education, even in larger companies. It's very, very hard. It's a political battle. So we can actually give users administrative rights, but we can actually restrict what they can do as admins. And we'll go through that. So I love this. These are some really high privileged accounts or services or privileges that they have access to by default. Tell me, who would ever need to a user act as part, or have a process act as them or act as part of the operating system? The what? Yeah, okay. But that's like very select few machines, right? Not like across the world, or however big it is. So you have these individual specific rights, like create a token object. That's basically creating a security access token on behalf of that user, so a process can use it to elevate or go across the network. Why does it need it then? It never needs it. But by default, all of these privileges here actually have administrative. If you're a local administrator or administrator group, you have all of these rights. The biggest ones, we'll go into these a little bit in detail, but debug programs, unless you're a programmer or someone in IT in this room, your normal users do not need the ability to debug a program, period. Impersonate a client privilege, take ownership over files, restore files. Like why does the users ever need to do that? They typically don't. So let's look at impersonating a client privilege. You have this primary or the security access token. It's basically using it to impersonate you for a process so it can authenticate over the network. Like I said, by default, the users like local service, network service, administrators have access to this. It makes sense for services to have these rights. But why does an actual user or an administrative group need those rights? They don't. So remove them. Why not? You have to do testing no matter what, but you have these individual rights that we can reduce our footprint and reduce our scope by quite a bit. So debug programs. Oh, in the bottom left here, this is actually the Win API level library or class that you can actually see these privileges. But SE debug priv basically grants anyone read-write access to memory. And you can act as part of you can almost basically act as part of the operating system and as a user attack at the system level. So you have near system level access to everything on the system, but from a user's perspective. You don't need this. Most users don't need it. It's used for, extracting hashes, passwords, whatever it is, but let's look at an example. Petya, ransomware, right? It's not the newest, but it's pretty new. This is from Carbon Black, and they actually went through and did an investigation of Petya and ransomware in general, and these are kind of the processes that Petya went to was, okay, let's look at, can you shut down? Can this user shut down the computer? Do they have the rights to do that? Do they have the right? Then the next step was, do you have the rights to actually go in and debug programs? Almost 90%, I don't have any actual raw statistics, 90% of the malware that I've seen in recent years uses debug privilege to escalate. So remove it. What is it going to do? Maybe, your developers, you may still have to have rights to it. Maybe you need to have rights to it, but in general, your mass users do not need rights. So remove it. The other one is the impersonated client privilege, or act as part of the operating system. If we remove these very, very highly specific rights or privileges, we're going to reduce our scope of impact by malicious threats. Another thing is login rights. It's high noon. You have the deny, you have a lot of different login rights as administrators, as local users, as remote desktop users, whatever it is. Does everyone on your network need to have the ability to log in as a batch job or log in as a service? They don't. So remove it. Deny them. All this is in group policy. It's all right there. And instead of explicitly, you can deny everyone, let's say, RDP access to your machines. But maybe specific users need the access. You can actually revoke or have them approve only certain users that can have this access, all through group policy. You can manage everything through. We'll get in there. This is an example. Here's in the group policy object editor. You actually have it underneath policies. Where is it at? Local policies, user rights management. There's a bunch of stuff in there. Again, this is just scratching the surface of user rights, but you have a lot of capabilities here. The next thing is actually, I think even cooler, is the local users and groups. So, yes, you have your domain administrator, you have your administrator accounts, but by default, there's also local groups on your machines. One of them is remote desktop users. By default, administrators and have rights to RDP or to change RDP. With local groups, we can actually clear out the entire built-in accounts, like for backup operators or for, I'm going to cheat here, terminal server, event log, whatever it is, these privileges, right? You can actually remove all the users and maybe add just one local user that only your IT admins, know the account for. Or don't add anyone. Just clear it out. Why would an administrator, do you allow your local administrators to change the RDP group? You can remove them. They don't need to, unless you have a specific need for it. So by managing these, we're replacing the default built-in user accounts and groups with our own specification, our own needs to fit our environment. So let's talk about task scheduler. So the task scheduler, who uses this? Yeah, everybody? Cool. Yeah. There you go. So with the task scheduler, we got to go fast, right? I love this. I don't know if you all have ever seen these memes. Anyways, they're awesome. Got to go fast. So let's say that you actually have my AC, right? My AC comes on. I have scheduled it to actually come on at 10 p.m. or whatever time it is, 5 p.m. after work. I've scheduled my lights maybe on the outside of my house when I leave to come on at 8 o'clock. Whatever it is, we have these actual scheduled jobs. But what if I want to make sure that all the water shut off? Unless you have some home automation and other things, you don't have a way to immediately tell them. You have to actually drive over to the home and make sure and turn off your water pipes and blah blah blah. So with group policy, we can actually use built-in task scheduler features to actually turn off a lot of really, well, we can use it to our advantage to both secure and to prevent other use cases, attacks. So this actually says most to least. It actually should be least to most. I realized that right before I came on the stage. So this is the very top privileges here, or service accounts, is what should be used when you're scheduling tasks. You should never really ever get into anything below the domain user. Even group managed service accounts you shouldn't use. So for the most part, with group policy, and we'll talk about immediate scheduled tasks, you can use local service, you can use network service, you can use these highly privileged accounts, but you can use them to your advantage to be way more secure at how we actually use scheduled tasks. Greatest thing about this, it's supposed to be a gift, it's not working, I don't know why. But immediate scheduled task is you have the capability of going into a system and actually running this actual task. Instead of going over the machine or setting up through group policy like PowerShell remoting or anything like that, you can actually do this all from group policy, and it can make it almost immediate when group policy refreshes. And depending on your organization, your side, you can actually have this go across all of your domains, and within 30 minutes, more than likely, this is going to be ran across all of your systems, and it's going to be way more secure. So to do this, you actually go in and you go to the control panel settings and you specify. But you actually are going to specify, I want to use NT Authority local service, network service, if you need that privilege. If you need to talk to a network, let's say for an API or whatever it is, you have to use kind of a network service. But for the most part, for any direct task in your organization, local service will do perfectly fine. And so with this, we can actually use PowerShell to launch these. Say, hey, this is immediate scheduled task. I want to run this PowerShell script or my function or whatever it is. And we can actually specify, do this whether the user is logged on or not, highest privileges, and don't store any passwords, right? Pretty easy to do. The great benefit of this is that when you use immediate scheduled tasks, there's no security access token. Well, there is a security access token that is a one-time use. Cannot be delegated, cannot be impersonated, and can't be reused on another machine. It's a one-time, one of the most secure ways that you can actually run scheduled tasks across your entire network. With this, you run as the highest privileges. You're logging, you can run it before a user's logged in or whether they're logged in or not, and you don't store any passwords at all. There's no user account information. You're just using the built-in service. Again, if you use the network service, or if you need network access, you use that network service. But I cannot, if you find a way to actually exploit this, please come, probably tell Microsoft and everything else, but tell me as well. And because I would love to see you be able to impersonate a security access token using this process in your environment. So in summary here with this is that I had to say this because I love this picture. If you don't give anybody arms, they can't pick up the key. All right? There's no, it's a really bad joke, but thought it was funny. So let's look at managing services. Just repeat. It worked last time. So with managing services, okay, let's say you have water in your house, right? And I go to the bathroom, and I actually just turn on the faucet, and I wash my hands, and I just leave it running, and I go and leave and go to work. 8 hours later, I come back home, I go into the bathroom, wash my hands, water's still running, I just always run it, right? Why? Would you ever do that? Yeah? I wouldn't. It's horrible for the environment and your bill. But why do we do this with Windows in general? Is with these services. So here's an example. You can't read that, right? So this is about 100 or so Windows services that are on every box. And about half of these, depending on, this is Windows Server 2016, about half of these are going to be actually on and running or set to be started at boot. So think about that. There's a huge list here. Let's say we actually have an IIS server, an Internet Information Services web server. In general, about these 8, give or take, depending on what you're trying to do, but the bare minimum, these 8 services need to be running. What are the other 50 doing? Why would you need print spool service or SMB sharing or whatever it is on these web servers? You don't. And by default, we automatically trust and we automatically think, oh, there's no configuration. We don't need to worry about this. These are automatically set to either start manually or start automatically at boot. But really, all we need is these 8. We don't need any more than that. So with group policy, we can actually configure this. We can look at individual services. We can set them to disabled, to enabled, to who has access to them. You can set restart attempts. So let's say you have IIS and you want to have it a restart 3 times, and then after that, kick off a warning or an email. You can do that all through managing it through group policy. We need to take very, very close attention to what's actually running on our systems because there's a lot of, unless you want to patch all the time. I know it's fun, right? You should, but you have to manage what people have access to and what's running on those systems as much as possible. All right, this is one of the coolest things that is new. Potty. Who here uses potty? Potty? All right, I thought it was it's really bad jokes. Stupid bad. So with Windows Server 2016 and Windows 10, there's a new group policy setting that you can use, and it's called process mitigation. Anyone here ever heard of IMET? Right? Yeah, everyone's heard of that. So this is kind of a new feature, again, for the newest version of, you have to be on domains, your domain controller service level has to be 2016 to use this, so this probably, you're not going to use this in the wild right now unless your organization's really fast at upgrading. But you have the ability to actually essentially do something very similar to IMET, but from a group policy perspective. There's a couple things I want to point out, and I just spelled these out. DEP is Data Execution Prevention. These are kind of just terms, so you know. This is more of restricting what processes can run in what space in memory. And you have very highly privileged spaces that maybe the operating system's using or whatever it is. This will actually prevent other processes from using that memory block. C-hop, structured, I can never remember the entire thing. So structured, exception, handler, overwrite protection. This is basically going to try to prevent stack-based buffer overflow attacks on individual processes. And then ASLR, Windows XP and Windows 7 got a lot better, but Windows 10's way better. But they use ASLR. So at boot, in the old days, ASLR would actually didn't exist. But when Windows XP booted, it would always use the same memory space. So it was really easy for attackers to say, all right, I know that when I restart my computer, Windows XP or whatever is going to use this chunk of memory to load this DLL or this library. I'm just going to inject my code right there because it's always going to be static. I already knew it. Windows 7 got a little bit better at that, at randomizing at boot, but ASLR will actually, is in Windows 10 now. It's complete randomization, so there's never a static place in memory. So if a process or malware actually needs to use a static location, you'll just overwrite it with whatever Windows has to do. And yeah. So there's a lot of cool things with ASLR. But we can actually use this per process on your systems. What I mean is that IE Explorer, right? Is it really hard to read? Like, yeah, it kind of is. But ASLR and DEP and C-hop can actually be specified to turn off or on individual processes like Internet Explorer or let's say your Outlook or whatever processes, Chrome. It might break some things, but that's the fun of it, right? So here's kind of a handy dandy graph of what that string. So you saw it was like question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark, one, question mark, whatever. Basically, in these key locations where we have FE and the top bar color-coded, are individual turn on, off, or keep it as it is settings. So 0 is off, disable, 1 is on, and question mark would be just keep it what is normally how it works. So we can actually turn on DEP, turn on C-hop, turn on bottom-up ASLR, so basically it'll look at a process and turn on ASLR through that individual running a process, so it's always randomized for that process. Really, really cool. There's still a lot more probably capable with this kind of functionality. Hopefully it becomes a little bit easier to manage instead of question mark, one, all that, but it's actually a really, if you're experimenting and you are advanced in your organization, try it out and use it for individual processes. It'd be pretty powerful to prevent attacks from. Scripting. Who here uses PowerShell? Yeah. Who here hates PowerShell? Leave. I'm just joking. No, like scripting is awesome, right? But in Windows ecosystem, PowerShell is king. It's extremely powerful. Just, there's all sorts of attacks. I think, all sorts of talks going on this week about PowerShell. It's pretty powerful. Imagine you have the entire Windows ecosystem at your fingertips. It's pretty powerful. So let's look at what we can do with group policy and PowerShell, or scripting in general. So there's a lot of different logging with PowerShell. Who here has like all the logging and it's all going to your SIM and everything, right? So much. Slackers. So with PowerShell, we can actually enable a whole bunch of different types of logging. We have, I'm going to again read module logging, script block logging, script execution, PowerShell transcription logging. So we can enable all this. This is great, right? We can actually see what is being used in our environment. I would say one of the biggest benefits with group policy is, yes, well, first let's talk about digital signing, right? You have digitally signing your scripts. You should be. Yes, it can be, you can set your execution policy to be, it has to be signed, or remote signed, but that's easy to be passed, right? I think we all know it's pretty easy to bypass. You have PowerShell.exe -NOP-H, and -BY. That is PowerShell.exe, no profile, hidden bypass. It's pretty easy to do. You can bypass anything. But one of the advantages, if you enable logging and you have digital signing enabled, then it becomes a standard in your organization to say, okay, we digitally sign everything. No one should ever be using NOP or hidden or bypass when they're running scripts. So now that we have the logging and this enforcement of digitally signing in our environment, we can actually, now the logs become a lot more useful. And you can actually set triggers upon finding these keywords in your environment. It's pretty powerful when you combine all of this together. So the other thing is like using lockdown IPs for WMI or WSMan or PowerShell remoting. WMI is Windows Management Instrumentation. WSMan is, I don't know what the S, I forget, but it's basically PowerShell remoting. So, but you can actually, instead of specifying like, all administrators can do this, or, we're gonna specify like actual static workstation. If you're an admin and you're in a decent sized network, you probably have a static IP. And you have specific rights that you're able to, or specific servers, specific things that you're able to access. So do the same with the actual, only allow your IT or very, very specific people instead of just like star. Like anybody can do whatever the hell they want. It's free for all. Chaos. So, and again, you use immediate scheduled task. PowerShell remoting is awesome, but if the system is compromised, you're screwed. Security access token, again, can be delegated and actually used to launch other services. So with immediate scheduled tasks, there is only a one-time use token, and you can actually only, you can't delegate it. You can't impersonate it. You can't use it for anything else. All right, so we'll talk about JEA. Anybody use JEA or heard of it? Just enough administration. So this is cool. The V right after me is actually talking about JEA, I think, a little bit more. I'm not putting words in his mouth, but JEA is really powerful. So let's say you have help desk, right? Or tech support or whatever it is, and you have a server that occasionally you need to reset the principal on it, or clear the queue, whatever it is. But that requires admin rights. Do you want to give that user like admin rights to that whole box? Nah. With JEA, you can give them admin, but you can specify that they can only run the restart principal command line, period. So you get full admin, but really they only have admin over that one functionality, that one thing. So when they log in, it'll actually create a virtual account and map those privileges to that account. And then when they log off, it'll remove it. And it's all about JEA. JEA is extremely powerful, and you have to use it going forward. It is going to revolutionize kind of Windows security in that sense. Along with AppLocker. Here it uses AppLocker. Yeah. So kind of a little history here. AppLocker, well, actually let's talk about PowerShell first. PowerShell has a couple different languages. They have a couple different language modes. They have the full language. That means you have access to the entire library of PowerShell and .NET. Then they have different other languages, like constrained language is one. The next are restricted language, and then no language. If you try to run actual constrained language and you have it set it up right, I don't know of a piece of malware or any malicious code that can bypass PowerShell, period. When you load the console, if you see one, please let me know, because I would love to get my hands on it. But with constrained language mode and PowerShell and app locker, you can block all PowerShell in your environment, period. PowerShell lockdown policy, if you want to test it out, there's an environmental variable called __ PS lockdown policy. Set it to 4, open up PowerShell, and you'll just see red everywhere. If you don't have app locker and constrained language mode set via group policy, this is really easy to bypass, just enabling the environmental variable. So, because I can just say, oh no, remove that environmental variable, and yeah. But if you just want to play around with it, just go to the constraint or this environmental variable, PS lockdown policy, and set it to 4. Most things will not run in PowerShell anymore. App locker. It's the Illuminati. Dangerous, right? It's a mystical beast. It's actually not. App locker has a lot of really, really powerful functionality, even if you can't use it in your environment, and I'll explain why. So when you have like individual EXEs, DLLs, MSIs, whatever it is, you can actually specify specific rules or conditions for those individual processes. There's 3 different conditions that we'll talk about. And these are the 3 in app locker. It's the hash condition, the path condition, and the publisher condition. One thing I want to note in the bottom corner, it says block rules always trump allow rules. So if you, no matter where you have an allow rule, if you have a block rule, it'll trump it no matter what. So keep that in mind. But most people do not want to enable app locker because, hey, it's going to break a bunch of crap, right? Like, I don't know what I don't know what services or what's installed or whatever it is. With app locker, you can actually do the audit mode. Audit mode is like extremely, extremely powerful, not just for, figuring out what your policies can be, but it's also for your like IR teams. Imagine if you do audit mode, just enable this, no rules. And you say, well, enable all the rules, but we'll get to it. You actually have a full audit trail of every process running on your system that started or stopped. How useful is that? Like, it's awesome. Like, you have every single process, and it will tell you, okay, if this rule would have applied, it would have stopped this process, or it would have blocked this one, or it would have allowed this one, or it would have, gotten rid of this one. All through the event log. And so now you have every single process in your environment with audit mode, and it'll tell you whether your rules would have passed or failed. Yes, ideally it would be, do this for about 6 months, a year, depending on your environment, and find out and start creating your more defined app locker rule set. But even just for that portion of app locker in audit mode, you have the ability to have a lot of logs and a lot of information that you did not have previously. Hash condition. So, every file has a unique hash you can read, or that. So this is great if you know software that doesn't have the actual individual, doesn't have a lot of updates, let's say. But every single time that one's updated, you have to update this rule. I don't really like this version of app locker. It has special use cases, or this condition, sorry, but I like the next one a lot better. So we have path condition. This is where the powerful becomes. You see that guy like throwing a rock off? So you can actually select a full path. And you can say, all right, anything in this path, anything in program data, anything in program files, but you can actually specify zip files, right? Why would an EXE need to be in local app data? There's certain use cases. Who here like uses WebEx and all those type of tools? Some of those need need massaging, but for the most part, you don't need EXEs to be running in those certain paths. So with the individual path condition, we can actually specify very granularly, but downside is you have to know where those paths are. Publisher condition. I love this. Thank you. I thought that was fun. So positive is the entire path. You can use wildcards. But you can say, okay, anything from Microsoft or Microsoft Office or this publisher of Microsoft can be a lab, right? Or maybe another company, maybe your own company, whatever it is. But they actually have to have proper digitally signing and have the ability to be able to register and talk with either your internal CA or a publicly available CA. So this is, I just kind of scrape the bottom or the very top of the bucket, right, of group policy. You can do so many things. Here's an example. This is GitHub. This is DoD's CIO actually issued the secure host baseline. You can go out there and download it. It's hardening for Windows 10 and apply it. They said every single one of our machines has to have these group policy settings enabled. This is for Chrome, a whole bunch of other, third-party products. Pretty cool. But one of the things that I want to point out is that, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I don't think it's 2016. I think it's Windows, but I do believe it's Windows 10. Yeah. Yeah. Well, so one of the things is like Google, group policy, whatever. I mean, there's tons of stuff out there. This has been around since Windows 2000, maybe even before that. Like, who here is in a domain, right? You probably have a domain in your environment. I was hoping for hands, so I could. Never mind. No, it's good that you didn't. But like, you have a domain, right? And you have this free service that's already available it's free across your entire organization. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to pay anything. It's included with Active Directory. It's included with Microsoft and MMC consoles. One of the biggest things to note is that group policy is basically an enterprise scale registry editor for your entire organization. Anything you can do in the registry, you can do through group policy, and way, way more. So this is my final statement is I'm very saddened. I don't know if you know, but MS Paint is going away. Well, in my heart, it already went away. So what is dead may never die. Thank you all. Appreciate it. These slides will actually be up on the site. You can actually contact me through Twitter, GitHub, blah, blah, blah. I'll be around all weekend. Thanks.